I'm getting a little warm over here.
Sean,
Yes.
quick question. This is a joke quick question, so you answer it while I turn the fan on because
Okay,
everyone's
yeah.
sweating. This is not a real quick question for the episode, but we talked about it. Quick question.
Yeah.
Where do you keep your drum heads?
That's funny. Upstairs. On my drums. I keep them on my drums. Well, the reason I texted you that is because it just popped into my head. And I'll just text you random things that just come to my
Yeah.
mind. But that's one of the most common questions I get asked here at the shop is
Yeah.
they'll take a walk around, especially if it's someone's first time in the shop,
In the new location,
in the new
especially.
location, and they
Yeah.
go, "Hey, where do you guys keep your drum heads?"
This is where we keep them. We keep them upstairs.
Yes.
We'll grab them for you. Just debunk that right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully
So, yeah.
do a little bit of damage control there. Basically, it's one of the most confusing, boring things to make someone search for it for themselves. We know where everything's at.
Sure.
We can just grab it for you. It's
Yep.
like most people know what they want, or if they don't know what they want, they're going off our recommendations. So
Yeah.
there's no need to have that on the main floor.
That's
Bunch
right.
of cardboard.
Yeah.
We don't need it down there.
Oh. It's a
So
perfect
anyway,
spot for 'em.
that's not the real quick question.
Oh.
Here is the real quick question that I want us all to weigh in on. All right, guys. Quick question. Why do my drums sound better at the drum shop?
because I tuned them.
Agree.
Because Sean tuned them. That is not the answer.
Oh. What is the answer?
I don't know, but it can't be that simple.
Oh, okay.
No. And I had someone come in the other day and brought in 2 snare drums, actually. They brought two of their snare drums and said, hey, can you take a look at these? I don't think they're sounding quite right. And I played them, and they sounded beautiful. They sounded so
Yeah.
good.
Right.
And there is the angle that we'll go with a couple angles here, but this is one of my angles is don't overthink it.
Right.
I think a lot of the time you can get in your own head about your drum sound, and snare drums in particular are like a hotbed for this. This just doesn't sound quite right. And you should try to figure out what's causing it to sound different, everything like that. But sometimes what you need is a fresh perspective from another drummer. And it might not be the drum, it might be your rack tom, depending on where it's tuned, causes a lot of noise. It might be just the area that you have it in, because the room affects the sound so much. There's a lot of different answers here, but sometimes it's best to just take a deep breath, step away from your drums, especially if you're putting new heads on or you're tweaking them before or after a gig or something like that, to really just step away if you've been in that tuning mode, focused for so long, and
Your tunnel
frustrated.
vision.
As soon as you get that tunnel vision and that like frustration starts to build up in your head, take a walk. Take a walk.
Yeah, I don't think drum tuning is anything to really get too crazy about, and I think most folks over analyze it,
Yeah.
And usually it's the opposite. They'll bring a snare drum in that just needs to be adjusted. The snares are whacked off, or like the drum is detuned. It just needs to be adjusted. You understand what I'm saying?
I know.
You understand what I mean?
I think I understand what you're saying.
Also, what you just said earlier about, when someone brings a drum in to get it tuned and it already sounds great, you're just like,
Yeah.
dude, this sounds awesome. But for whatever reason, they think in their head, hey, it doesn't sound like it does,
Yeah.
especially modern music right now. Everything's so compressed and overproduced.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's nothing. I love a nice ringy drum, like especially like the old records back in the olden days. Like you hear those drums, man, they sound like ringy
Yeah.
and organic. You could tell that the room that's reverberating, like it's just
Drums
you
are
can hear it
singing
all,
out.
man.
Yep.
It's like everything's just too compressed, too perfect.
Everything's rolled off.
Everything's rolled off, and it's just too perfect. And drums should sound, organic. It should have some resonance to them and ring.
I mean,
and sound like a drum.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I understand that that's not everyone's opinion.
Right.
A lot of people have in their mind that I want to sound exactly like that record.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to go for. And you can do that. There's plenty, believe me, there's plenty selection of drum heads, different ways we can tune. We can help you out with that. There's dampening out the wazoo and every inside the drum, outside the drum, mounted to the drum, stuck on the drum. There's ways that we can really make your drum sound like just about anything. The question is really, in my mind, the why behind behind the question.
I know why. Because when you bring it to a drum store, the reason it sounds better in a drum store is because the drum is surrounded by other drums. And when it's surrounded by other drums, it just sounds better. So what you need to do is buy more drums and have them around.
That's the solution.
And that's the solution. And then your drums sound as good as they do in a drum store.
If your drum does not sound that good, you need to look around and it does sound good in the drum store. Look around, count the number of drums in the room, and buy that many drums.
Well, I always thought the same thing too when you're testing cymbals. Sometimes you have to get them away from other cymbals, you know, so much around and how it resonates. Well, that's not going to sound that way when you get it home behind your set.
Yep.
So yeah, you know, it's good to kind of take
separate
a little bit, take a drum away from, you know, where it is, and maybe it sounds like crap in your basement because the acoustics in your basement suck. You know, that's a lot of it too.
Yeah.
So then you bring it in here, and I hit it, and it's like, dude, this sounds great. Well, the acoustics in here
rule. The whole store is a drum shell.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to resonate. The whole room.
As you're talking, John, I can literally hear the cymbals vibrating. Like I can hear because I'm standing right next to him. I can hear them, and it's one of those things that like
vibes.
It's sound waves, man. The room does affect your sound. I always say that like the number one thing that affects the sound of your drums are your drums. And the second thing is the room before tuning. Like the second thing is literally the room.
That's right.
Like it is so important where your drums are, especially when you're recording. Forget about it. Like that's half the stuff, you know, nowadays that I do with recording. The guitars and the bass, everything's basically plugged direct in, and they'll modify it afterwards with technology. They can make it sound like it's coming out of this amp or in this room, have this many tweeter, like all sorts of stuff. It's basically like, okay,
cheating.
What room do we want? Yeah. No, it's like, what room do we want? Because we need to get the drums to sound this way.
That's right.
It's that important that it's like, if you didn't have drums in your songs, if you weren't recording acoustic drums in your songs, that's why there's so many albums recorded in people's bedrooms that sound incredible, is because they require something that perhaps vocals and, you know, the treatment of the room and the reverberation of the room is so important to them, where it's not nearly that important to some guitars or different things like that.
I remember John telling me a story that did you not record playing on boxes? Is that a true story? Am I getting it wrong or right?
No. That's one of my favorites.
You did a recording on boxes.
That's one of my favorites.
But that's what it called for, right?
Like cardboard boxes?
Yep.
There you go.
So it was recording studio in Orlando, Florida, and we're doing late recording. It's actually one of the engineers there, and he had some music. He's a good guitar player. And then he got a bunch of us. I did some sessions there. And then he got we were friends, and got a bunch of us together to do some recording late at night after everybody else was out of there. And so we did this a bunch of times, just different things. We were having fun and some nice writing. That was good friend. That was Mike Redmond, good engineer, genius. Anyway, so we're doing this, and while we're doing this, it's kind of one of those nights where everybody's partying. A little bit of a party going on, and coming up with some different ideas, and messing up and laughing at each other, and just having a good time. It was pretty laid back. And then we got into a discussion about some of the recording techniques, and everything was pretty flat and pretty dry back then. Okay, really, just like we're talking about drum sounds now, real drums, real sounds. Okay, but there was a period where some of it, pull that front head off the bass drum, stuff a pillow in there, go, that's what's happening. And there were sessions, and we were just making fun of it, even though some of them were well done, the sound, and they were heavyweight players that were doing it, their hit songs, and they had these really flat, dry. You know what? It sounds like a cardboard box. What do you think? And so, like I said, we were partying. We're in that, you know what? You're right. Let's see what we can do with that. So because of equipment coming in, large corrugated boxes, that kind of thing, we said, let's give it a shot. So there was this one big box and got a little hole in here, could put a pedal, just put a piece of wood, put a pedal, and so you could hit this thing with a bass drum pedal, snare drum stands, couple couple corrugated boxes. Sure,
Yeah.
stick them on there. Okay? Stick them on there.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what we did. And then we recorded it. We recorded the music.
Yeah.
But see, that's what
And-
you had to do back in the day. If you wanted your drums to sound like cardboard boxes, you had to record playing on cardboard boxes. If you wanted your drums to sound like they were recorded in a tiled bathroom,
Yeah.
you needed to go record your drums in a tiled bathroom. Now you can just get on your computer and go
Cardboard
yeah.
box samples.
cardboard box sample,
Okay.
boom, tiled room, boom. You know, now you can just do all that.
Well,
but back
yeah.
in the day,
had
ding,
to do
ding,
it
ding, you
yourself.
had to do it yourself.
This was just a joke.
I know.
You know.
But how did it turn out?
Oh, it was great.
See?
Yeah.
Oh
That's
yeah.
what I'm talking
yeah.
about.
Boom.
Yeah, because these guys, the engineers, the guys were
Yeah.
good. They were really good people. Florida had an immense bunch of sound guys.
And gators.
I don't know what that was about, but there were a whole bunch, especially South Florida.
And
Just
gators.
geniuses and gators, and they just had a way, and they would, manipulate these things. And it was analog. I mean, come on, it was just you had to kind of know what you were doing too.
Yeah.
And,
You can't wait.
and
That's
they'd stick
expensive.
some microphones on, a little processing, stick a little reverb on that. Go ahead, whack them, Johnny. That was it.
That's great.
That was it. And that was a joke, of course, but it was fun. It was fun because we were making fun of the drum sounds. It sounded
Yeah.
like they were playing on cardboard boxes. So we set some up and we recorded them, and that's what it sounded like.
But sometimes that's what you have to do. Like it just the Beatles come together reminds me of that too, because I don't know how they achieve. I think they put a blanket over the drum set to get that
Yeah, they
effect. Is
threw
that
some
right?
towels over,
So
essentially, yeah.
sometimes you just have to do those little tricks. You're like, you know what? It needs a little something extra here, or like those cool studio tricks. Now you just press
Yeah.
a button. But I love
It's fun.
the practical solutions.
That's that in my mind. If you're recording fairly regularly, I mean, I just did it on weekends. The last time I did it regularly, so it wasn't every single day. Like it wasn't like I had a week in the studio. It was like home recording, but doing the best we can. You get it if you get in a funk, something like that helps. Like I've done pillowcases on drums and stuff to
Yeah.
get a certain sound. I've recorded like for percussion effects like change in your pocket.
Yeah.
Like you know what I mean? Like the world's rhythmic. It's
That's
it's
right.
all fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
There you
all
go.
fun. It's like
There you go. Good
it's-
deal there.
that's
and I
it.
just remember you telling me
We
that
should
story
start
back
doing
then, so
that.
I was like,
Yeah, you remember.
yeah, I remembered
great.
it.
That's a great
But
story.
also, it reminded me of something else too. When we got in, Roland had made these the triggers that you put on your cajon.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show you, like,
Yeah,
the-
you trigger. So the trigger, just to explain a little bit, you clip it in the sound hole in the back of the cajon,
Right.
And then it just has a basic electronic to it that separates low and high end. So
Yeah.
it'll recognize with a cajon. Typically, you just
Yeah.
have your bass tone, you have your high tone,
Sure.
and then it would either play a sampled sound or affect it,
or it would act as a mic too.
or it would act as.
But
a mic.
yeah, it's triggering a sampled sound much like an electronic drum set, and we've stuck that on a bass drum head box and played it, and it sounded freaking great. It was just so funny. Like
Yeah.
it's triggering the sounds. It sounded like orchestral like music or whatever. The timpani is like, it's amazing. Those triggers and the samples, and it's
Yeah.
just amazing that the technology that we have at our fingertips right now. And it's like,
Oh, it's crazy. It's constantly getting crazier. What is the best room you guys have ever played or recorded in or performed at? Or one that just stands out to you as being the absolute best. And I'll let you know, I'll start, because I've had the opportunity of playing in 4 different barns, and that is my favorite thing ever. Like playing inside of a giant wooden room like that, with my drums have never sounded better than in that space where it's open, it's a large room, you've got all the reflections, but all the good reflections. Sometimes you have a stone wall at either end. Sometimes it'll just be all wood or, metal roofing or whatever isn't the best. But that is like I would love that. I want to own a house one day that has a barn, and I'll just put my drums in there. Like that is like my absolute favorite. There's a lot of studios that are built in barns and like
Yeah,
they renovate
absolutely.
because of that sound.
gonna say,
and
yeah.
like that is my number one. I mean,
I
I've
can
played on
see
different
that.
stages, different outside, indoors, all sorts of things. My drums have sounded good. It's always nice being mic'd up, but in a barn.
Yeah.
Like, I could sit there and play for hours.
I'm going to say it would have to be a club. Like, I'll just say probably one of the times I played the Chameleon where it was literally a packed house, like with the Misfits or Bowling for Soup, that I had the opportunity to do some really cool shows where there was a lot of people there, and the drum, we were opening, so I had my drums dialed in, and everything sounded great, and just the power behind all of the drums, and then. I've also played the Chameleon Club and different clubs where there's no one there and it echoes, and that's kind of sucks. But when there's a lot of people there and the whole balcony is filled and there's people far as the eye can see, that's a good feeling. That it sounds good and everything's just coming together, and the sound system and everything else. That's I wanted to play in a band like that, and when I'm doing that, I'm like that's what.
And
like.
also. I know, just as a note, I've talked to sound guys, and the amount of adjustments that they have to do between sound check and the actual show because of the natural dampeners of all the people in the room.
Yeah.
It's amazing sometimes how much they have to bring up or pull back, depending on what it is, frequency-wise, to really cut through in that same exact space, but with just different people in there.
John, what's your ideal place? Like as far the question was like,
well, your favorite place to play or your ideal room.
Okay.
I don't know what to say in that regard because there were a lot of venues and a lot of rooms back in the day that they were set up, to contain the music, I remember a couple lounges in Vegas where they had curtain baffles that they could use to be able to tone a band down when they needed to. Yeah, it was a little bit of that just to kind of, or open it up a little bit. There were a couple things like that happened. But the venues were, you just didn't like the echo thing, the bouncing around. Trying to remember the worst would have been, that was Third Stream. We opened for Spyro Gyra at the
Third Stream,
the big building, at in Harrisburg. I'll think of that then too. I should know it, but it's kind of a round. Ish room and stage and the roundish. Yeah. And I remember that Dad Baby was echoing all over the place. And
that's tough.
It's really tough.
Yeah.
That was pretty ugly.
Sounds like there's another drummer competing with you playing in a room somewhere else.
You're like,
what's going on?
Who is playing?
Exactly, yeah.
He's just a little
He's
off.
a little off.
He's screwing me up.
I remember.
Don't listen to yourself play. Yeah.
The place. Anyway, that I remember as being really problematic.
Yeah.
Trying to.
And it's
then
yeah.
And then there's speaking of round, down toward Philly, Royersford. I don't know if any of those guys would ever hear this. Can't remember any of the particular, but I recorded there with guitarist Steve Giordano, and the room was a geodesic. It was a dome.
Shout out.
And that was wild. And especially having that environment with the music we were playing. It was all Giordano stuff. He wrote some crazy, great music.
Did you all live record together, so you were all playing at the same time?
Yeah, that was actually Third Stream with Steve Giordano. So it was Stroman, Miller, Steve, and myself. And we did, Steve was hooked up. I think the guy that owned the studio was a student of Steve's. And we went in and recorded some of Steve's stuff. And it was awesome. It was so cool. It was really different. The way the sound would move and go to the opposite side of the room, we started experiencing that. Like what I'm playing here on this side of the dome, you hear just really very clear on the other side of the dome, the way the sound, the waves, all the vibes moved
the
around that
nodes
room.
And the connection points.
It was crazy cool. So that was a wonderful experience. And the music, of course, the music was real good. Music was wonderful. It was great to play that stuff. And I mean, that was, some good jazz. but the best work I ever did was when I had the opportunity to record at Criteria Studios in Miami. So that's a whole nother level.
What is that? Is was it a special room or was it just the engineers knowing how to like?
Well, the
Dial it
rooms,
in.
I worked in all the rooms,
Okay.
and so I got to kind of experience. Now, the main room would be, what would really be cool,
Yeah.
because they could record orchestras,
Oh wow.
small orchestra.
Yeah.
It was very, very cool stuff in that regard, and I was just in and out for a couple things, couple bands, and I did a commercial. I did a
Jingle.
well, no, it was a theme. It was a, I guess it was a theme song for a Spanish soap opera. And it was just cool to be there because of the famous people that were there. And I was starting to meet a couple people in the Miami area. I was down there doing some work in South Florida, hanging out for a while. I got to hear Jaco Pastorius when he was playing with Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders. Who's this nut?
Who's this nut?
I mean, just everybody. It was a lot of good bands. Tommy Strand's band, I think Jacko played with him too. So I'd go out and hear those bands in the clubs where they'd be playing, and I'd just be losing my mind because they were really, really good. They were tight, good show, great musicians. A lot
And
of
the
those
room
guys
sounded
went
good.
on to be
That's it.
studio guys that did the stuff with, the Miami Sound Machine. Those guys.
Miami
And
Sound Machine.
Just lots of good people, and then every once in a while you'd see a star, because I was there, several days maybe working, and there was always heavyweights recording there.
Yeah.
That was the Bee Gees. That was a big deal there, and there was a lot of great artists, and there were several other studios that were doing well there. They had great sound people, and they could really get it done.
And they knew the room too. That's the thing about those recording studios is like they knew absolutely everywhere. They're like, put your bass drum right here because this is the spot.
All that.
And I was
You're right.
as listening to John here and we're talking about rooms and all this kind of stuff. It just dawned on me when I realized how important the room is to sound was when I was in high school, right before my band was going to play in I think it was the 10th grade talent show, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had to go in and audition. So I brought my drums
boy.
in and we played they had these little studios that were like acoustically padded and all this kind of stuff.
Oh,
so we went in
okay.
and set my drums up and it sounded so good. I remember how great it sounded in there. I've not thought about that in a long time. And then they came in and watched us play, and we were like, "Dude, can we keep playing in here right now?" And
Yeah.
they're like, "Yeah, go ahead." And I remember remarking to the guys in my band, I was like, "This sounds so good in here." But that was like, And then I started collecting egg cartons to hang up on the ceiling and such. I never did do that at my parents' house, but I wanted to do that to
Right.
create my own studio.
Yeah, I'm about to do that because I'm going to do some recording in a couple weeks, and the room my drums are in now is like this small office.
Yeah.
But it's the liveliest.
Yeah.
It is insane.
A little bit of foam goes a long way.
It's like stuff
have
like
some-
that.
I have
certain
some
things,
foam.
Treat the corners a little bit.
Yeah.
Some of those, you know what I mean? Stuff like that really, really does help cut down on those reflections. It is kind of a bummer that like a lot of these ideal rooms are big rooms
Yeah.
because your drums always get shoved in a small room. I feel like that's consistent through like everyone,
Yeah.
through everyone's, unless it's in a basement or a garage, which hopefully you can work your way out of that. It's like, what is the smallest amount of space that we can allot to the drums so that he's happy, so that I can utilize all this other space for other living? You know what I mean? So it is funny though. It's like, I wish there was, I don't know.
Smallest.
We need a big room.
Your drums are in the smallest room of your house, probably.
Yes,
There you go.
they are. Let's change that. I don't know.
I
how
know.
to change that.
But we need to change that.
we need something else. I need to find a hidden room. If you've seen videos of people like renovating, they like find a hidden room in their house. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you know what I mean?
No,
It's like,
yeah, those
I'm like,
are all-
okay,
yeah, right.
You didn't realize that there
Yeah,
was a
sure.
giant attic above your house. Like, you didn't do the math. But anyway, let's dive into some of John's story and pick his brain a little bit more in Between the Plots.